Welcome to another one of our mini-series of video lessons, and this one's really going to get into how simple flies came to transform our view of river fly fishing. And we're going to get to an on-stream demo really soon, but before that I thought we'd just have a little chat about the basic sort of outlay or layout, if you like, of what we're going to be on with.
We have got quite a few points we want to get into this in as short a time as possible, keep things really focused.
I think that list really helps with to keep us on track with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we can get off on tangents, and we really don't want to. We want to bring you really crystallise these concepts. So it's kind of about historic and modern fishing and how there's a convergence, almost like things have gone full circle.
Yeah, I think that idea of reinvention or rediscovery of things that used to be important when people needed to depend on fly fishing for like livelihoods and stuff like that being sort of rediscovered by competition anglers who needed to kind of catch fish to score points.
It's like the simplicity born of necessity. There's no complication that doesn't have a very good reason to be there.
Yeah. So, I mean, anything that, the sort of things that Charles Cott and Isaac Walton would recognise, W.C. Stewart, upstream fly fishing with a wet fly, modern competition anglers, North Country spider fishermen, there's the soft hackle sort of tradition that you have in America as well. All of those things, they've got kind of core elements, and I think a lot of people these days, they think, oh, we've got these modern competition methods and all that other stuff, that's all old hat, and it's kind of, you sort of blow it off really, and I think that's a huge
there's
mistake.
no space for traditional or old literature, but in actual fact, a lot of these tactics that people are using now would have been completely normal scenes in historic fly fishing.
I think we almost forgot it when it came to sort of using some other tactics when people were doing it just for leisure, and they didn't necessarily have to actually kind of understand, they didn't have to deliver, a basket of fish at the end of the day. So I think it's probably a good time to jump into that on-stream lesson. We can have a look at a tactic using modern tackle, completely, space age kind of materials, that kind of thing. But I guarantee that people like W.C. Stewart, all of those old school guys, they'd completely recognise this simple upstream wet fly technique.
Yeah. So here we are on stream with Paul. He's fishing a Western outfit with a single wet fly. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the rod and line position. That's what this lesson's all about. So I'll do a quick rewind for a closer look. As we can see from the moment the fly touches down, the rod's held high and the line's held up off the water, forming the classic triangle. Now we see this shape in many forms of angling, both historic and modern. And that's because it leaves nothing on the water between the angler and the fly that could spook the fish. A nice little bit of fishing there from Paul, and we'll be picking up on the rig and the equipment of the whole setup in just a few minutes. First of all though, let's rewind, and I'd like to know from you where you sort of came from to arrive at that particular setup and method, because a lot of people ask why we fish the way we do, and there's kind of a story to that.
It is, and it is almost that kind of circular sort of thing really. It's kind of arriving at, I mean, there wasn't much equipment in that clip, right? So, but how did we arrive at the things that worked, and then threw out the things that perhaps were just like fluff, if you like, and just sort of peripheral? And for me, I don't know about you. I mean, I think we both had pretty similar introductions into the sport of fly fishing.
Yeah, I think we were both bait fishers from an early age.
Definitely, and that for me, that was a massive thing when I was a kid. Actually, putting any sort of faith at all in an artificial fly. I was always astonished when people actually caught anything on a fly, you know.
You can't throw loads of baiting around your fly and attract a shoal of fish.
Well, you know that fish eat worms, real worms, maggots, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, you know, to actually put your faith in that kind of crude bit of fluff and feather, that was a massive sort of mental leap for me. And to be honest, you know, when I first started fly fishing, it was on still waters, generally stocked with rainbow trout. And, you know, you'd sort of get to be able to have a reasonable degree of success. But that transition into river fishing, I think for me, what tended to happen was that I tended to try and use the same tactics that I was using on the still waters. Yeah. So that would generally wind up with me casting a line out onto the water.
Laying it flat
on, swinging it round with a low rod angle. And then you'd every now and again, you'd lock up and a fish would grab it at slam tight and you'd actually get a fish. What you did get was an awful lot of just unhittable sort of grabs at the fly.
I often like to use the term you were catching fish in spite of what you're doing, not because of what you're doing.
Yeah, and it was fun. You know, don't get me wrong, it was fun. But I think it was only when I started reading some of the magazine articles on, you know, methods like the duo or even check nymphing and that kind of thing. Applying that out on stream, that was when I started to get a little bit more consistent success. And then we had sort of actually workshopping with top anglers like John Tyzak. You know, we mentioned him a few times in our stuff.
We've both been students of John at one point.
Definitely, yeah. But so then, you know, particularly with that duo method, you know, able to actually go out and when the conditions were right for it, actually catching a few fish and sort of seeing, oh, wow, you know, it's not just like a one fish a session sort of a thing. You know, you can get 10 or 20 fish in a session.
It's worth pointing out, and I think we're sort of working towards that. With the duo, there's right ways and wrong ways to do it. Like with all of fly fishing, and it's what we're working towards.
Yeah.
That line up off the water in competition style duo fishing is what brings the advantages of the historic methods that we're talking about.
Yes, and well, we'll definitely get into that, certainly when we break down the on-stream demo as well in that lesson. But
in terms of that wrong way, though, flat line on the water, almost like you're treating the duo like you're fishing upstream dry fly. You make a long cast and lay everything on the water. You're suddenly giving away all the advantage that the equipment you have can offer.
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge thing for me. And I think as well, and I guess plenty of people can identify with this, that, you know, you find a method that you're a little bit confident with, and then all of a sudden, if the conditions are different, and there's other people out there catching fish and you're not, and you're tearing your hair out. There's that frustration where it's like, you know, there's something that you're missing. And I felt that very, very deeply. But it took a long time for both of us, like on stream, working things out, throwing out some of those, that the laying the line down when it wasn't necessary. And the things that stopped you from catching fish, actually weeding those things out. Over time, and by workshopping with these top anglers as well, it meant that we were able to get to a point where we actually understood the power in simple flies and simple impressionistic patterns, but it's really that bag of tricks of the techniques that you use with it, those simple applications of techniques. And for me, that was the real epiphany, and that's what, you know, we're trying to share with you in these sort of 3 lessons. It's throwing out some of the peripheral, superfluous stuff, focusing down on the power that in simple tactics and simple flies. It's technique. It's all about technique, basically.
You see it a lot, don't you? Every now and again on fishing forums, it comes around. You know, every sort of 18 months, someone will say, "Do you know what? I think you could get away with just half a dozen fly patterns."
Yeah.
And it's like, welcome to the real world. It is like a revelation that many people go through, and I suppose what we're trying to do here is help people sort of accelerate that process for people. Drop the complexity and get some successful patterns.
Yeah, and that's all great, and we can say drop the complexity, but what do we actually mean you should do? So why don't we have a look now and break down what went on in that short clip? Very simple, very short, but let's have a close look at that just now.
Yeah, it was one of these things where we'd got this idea that we could get pretty much something of everything we've mentioned so far and everything we're talking about. We had a modern competition fishing rod. For if you're interested, it was a Gray's Streamflex Plus 3-weight, wasn't it?
Yeah, XF2.
Fished at 10 foot. A regular fly reel. There's no magic there, just a normal fly reel. And we even snuck in there. It may have looked like a French leader or one of these micro thin fly lines, but it was actually a length of Tenkara level line. So we managed to mix the sort of principles of historic upstream wet fly,
Yeah.
Tenkara in sort of modern and historic styles, modern competition fishing, all line off the water to the fly. So you saw everything there, really.
Absolutely, and that fluorocarbon line, it's a pretty good, well, it's a damn good substitute for horsehair line, casting line. You know, it's the same mechanics that the old school people would recognise.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. And again, a very simple, it's definitely not a close copy fly, dead drifted upstream. It's that timeless sort of method that people keep coming back to.
You would have seen it in Isaac Walton.
Yeah.
You know, and in Isaac Walton's day, they didn't use reels.
There's the angler and the loop rod. I think Webster wrote that. Fantastic book. W.C. Stewart, we mentioned before, upstream wet fly.
Yeah, long rods again.
Yeah. But then, you know, the competition, you know, it looks like a competition method the way that I fished it, because it had, you know, all the modern gear. So what is it that people keep coming back to that makes that simple fly that's mobile and it's dead drifted? How does that, you know, why is that so effective? And it's timeless in its efficacy. And I think, you know, jokingly in the email lessons, I've sort of referred to this triangle of awesome to, you know, just to really emphasize the fact that actually that sort of almost roof-like profile of a long, supple rod with like a line that's supported off the water between you and the fly, it just gives you so many advantages, not only in dead drift, but also in not spooking flies as well. Spooking fly,
Spooking fish.
not spooking fish with what you're doing. So you've not scared the fish before you've managed to show it a fly, which is massive.
We've seen in tests we've done, the difference between laying line on the water and keeping all the line off the water has resulted in 7-fold increase in the number of fish.
Yeah.
And we've actually had that experience and been able to share that with clients when we're guiding as well.
Several times, and not just like a one-off thing.
Yeah. And I actually had an instance this year where I took out 2 guys, and one of the guys was having a real mental block on keeping his rod up off the water. So every time I sort of got off his case and let him relax, he would let his line sag back on the water. And his friend that was fishing, you know, there were 2 guys out together. His friend was fishing it almost perfectly. You know, he got it from the off, and he did a very good job of fishing like you saw Paul in the video. And at the end of the day, they were very, very close. I think it was 6 and 48 or something like that. So it was almost that 7-fold.
Very close to that 7 times increase. Now then, that mobile dead drift is, you know, that's going to catch you fish day in and day out. It's a fantastic method. But when you start looking at these simple patterns, you know, what happens when you change that soft hackle fly to a stiff hackled wet fly? You know, we're going to pick this up in later lessons, but just starting to sow the seed of the idea of using that stiff hackle to anchor that fly and actually stretch out that triangle even further by being able to pick up small currents, to lock into opposing currents and actually kind of hold that line off the water at greater range. That is then starting to get into the real meat and gravy of what these lessons are about, and that is how changing small elements of your fly actually helps you as an angler. It does stuff for you and how you can present those flies. So one of the things, in fact, we wanted to pick up on the next one, which again, do keep tuning into this little mini series, because the next one's going to pick up right off the back of this one, and it's going to show John demonstrating the benefits of a mobile hackled fly, a longer soft hackle fly than the one that I was using to dead drift. But using that, I mean, I know you're a big fan of it, so I'm going to let you talk about that sort of pulsation and the, you know, that kind of action that it can, well, for me, it can really transform a day. One of those days where you would otherwise be frustrated by the lack of response from a fish.
I can't tell you the number of times where I've been guiding for people and they've wanted to know, you know, show me what makes you better, why you catch more fish.
Yeah, how come you went through behind me and caught that fish when I tried it with the, you know, the same rig?
And yeah, quite often the best sort of, it's like a party trick. The best way to show someone is let them fish an area and let them fish it till they're absolutely done and say, okay, have you finished? You definitely think you've covered everything. Okay, take the rod, offer a manipulated presentation, and more than half the time, enough to look like you really know what you're doing. Yeah, you can usually offer a manipulated presentation and get a bonus fish. It's by no means guaranteed, but it's a pretty good bet. So we'll talk about that in the next lesson.
Definitely, and we'll fly straight into it in that video as well. So in the meantime, obviously feel free to rewind, check back over the breakdown of the stuff that we've covered in this lesson. Make sure you're really on top of that dead drift presentation, because to be honest, for 80% of the time, that's going to be a solid producer of fish for you under any circumstances. But before you do, if you're not already on our email tutorials list, where you get a ton of, more than a year's worth of free lessons anyway, do sign up, because you'll get notifications of what's going to come up in the next lesson and when the next lesson's out and that kind of thing. So it just helps you, make sure that you don't miss any of this series of lessons. So go ahead and do that now. We'll put some links either where we embed this video or actually on screen itself within YouTube, the little clickable icons. So you can go ahead and register, make sure that you don't miss a thing. So come back, check us in the next lesson.